Good morning, everyone. This is the development group conversation. If you see in the agenda document, there's a link to slides as well as other relevant information related to key reviews and videos. My name is Christopher Leffeltz. I'm the Vice President of Development and would love to get started with some questions. If you have any questions related to the abuse section, let's hold those and do that in a private stream. Just to basically keep some of that information confidential. So Danielle, you're up first.
Yeah, I was excited to hear you're trying out Ally for OKRs. We've played with a lot of different approaches to this in our team, and I was just wondering if you could add some additional color to the slide of just your impressions so far.
Yeah, sure thing. So one thing to note, first of all, is that there was a discussion up front about using GitLab and having OKRs. And we really felt like if we were going to do OKRs right, we were going to have a lot of additional features and functionality added to GitLab. So the product team took that under advisement and they just kind of decided not to do that. So we said, okay, let's go out and look for a potential company that's actually focused specifically on this. And we chose Ally associated with this. My first impressions of it is that it solves a lot of the problems that we were looking to solve. The best example of this is like roll up OKRs, where like, say you have a leader who has a top level objective, and then you'll have several people who are working below that. You can basically roll up progress associated with that. And you don't have to do any of that. Another feature that's super useful is oftentimes we'll be in progress of getting like a conformance training done. So as an example, DIB training, we want to complete that for our team, but we've actually started last quarter on that. So we can actually start with a point and then we can have a final target and then measure the percentage associated with that. It does it all that for you rather than you have to kind of go and figure that out. Another feature we currently don't have that we want to have is GitLab integration so that it can actually go back to issues, and as issues close, that'll measure progress associated with it. But that's supposedly coming in beginning of Q3 is my understanding. So we're excited to see that integration associated with it. So those are all the pluses. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't at least have some commentary on kind of some of the challenges. Probably the one challenge I would say is that like before when I set up a format page, because of the way GitLab works and kind of the way we structured ours, it's really easy to take a snapshot associated with it of kind of status and then kind of put that into like a presentation. Ally's a lot more, I don't want to say clunky, but it's definitely, its user interface has some challenges with it, and you can't necessarily get that same framed view. So you have to kind of go look at each OKR individually. And you can see a good summarization, but you don't necessarily get the details that you would be looking for associated with it. I'm trying to think of other challenges we've seen, just kind of normal startup with a new tool kind of stuff. Like how do we actually structure these? How do we actually think about these? It's forcing some deeper thought early on, which GitLab, when we use GitLab, we could be a lot more free form. So I think that that's actually a good thing, but at the same time, it does challenge you to kind of do it from that perspective. I don't know if any of the directors in development have any additional feedback they'd love to share, or if I missed any kind of the highlights from the use of it. And Danielle, thank you for typing a lot there. I know I talk fast and quickly. I appreciate it.
Oh, that was really helpful. I think I'll pass this on to my team so they can consider it too. Thanks.
I guess I could add one other thing that I think maybe is useful about it is that it does have a concept of kind of a check-in and kind of prompting people to update the status. And so that can be useful in terms of not, kind of having that part of the tool and not having to like go around and ask, for status kind of at the point that, we want to highlight something.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we've really been trying to get better about in general in development is we're really good at cadence updates, particularly for super important things like what we call rapid actions or other activities. But OKRs has been one area where we've been a little bit more loose with that kind of update of cadences. So the check-in feature does actually help with that. It does kind of set expectations. So I agree, it's definitely a good thing for us to have because full transparency, I think there was about a year and a half ago, Eric and I were talking and we realized that 6 weeks had passed into the quarter, which is halfway through, and we hadn't really even like updated the OKRs as an example. So this is, this just gets us into better habits in general from that perspective. And Danielle, I don't know if, I think Mech between Mech and KT, they set up like a little training bit. So I don't know if you've seen that, but that's something useful. And if you find it useful to get potentially one of us to talk with your team, we're more than happy to do that as well. If that.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, I'll take you up on that for sure. I'll follow up.
Just want to say I'm here just holding my words. I'll share the guidelines to you, Daniel, and then we can have you digest that. We're still figuring out the guidelines, and this quarter, just to be fully transparent, it's more of an experimentation to see what process works best to fit each and other teams. Ally is also working on their GitLab integration, so you can link GitLab issues as a task in the KR. And that is one. For engineering, we have been using GitLab for OKRs for the past. So it's just I would say a different take on OKRs.
Cool. I can't wait to learn more. I don't have anyone to hand it off to. Sorry.
That's all right. We'll give folks a few seconds. Maybe a short group conversation today.
I just typed in a question there, Christopher. So do you have any early impressions on engineering allocation, how it's going, benefits, drawbacks, et cetera?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, so TLDR, could I do a TLDR up front on this one? I think they're going well. I think that the fact that we're considering adding a sixth one is pretty exciting, just from the perspective of even considering at this early stage, because we've only been doing it for roughly about 6 weeks, basically about the start of the quarter. What I've seen is a much more decided focus on things that I feel like we need to be proactive on. So as an example, you know, auth is a good example where it's not a problem until it becomes a problem. Like everybody basically doesn't worry about it until we hit scaling limits, and then all of a sudden it becomes a crisis. And that's largely how we've been dealing with a number of issues up to this point. Is we wait till it's a crisis, and then we effectively have to maneuver very quickly with a lot of churn associated with it. So have we successfully prevented one of those? I don't think we have, but most of the things that we've been kind of looking at have been long range from that perspective. Certainly I view the DB allocation ones. If we look at that from a product prioritization, I don't know how we would have gotten those prioritized as effectively as we have. So from that perspective, I also see it as a success that we're actually seeing some momentum there. A lot of this is kind of just normal project management. Once we decide, okay, we're going to go do something, how do we best go do it? But it's also getting us to think deeper about things like, okay, like how do we think about the system? How do we think about it at scale? How do we actually measure to know that we have some confidence that it's going to not fall over in the next 6 months, as an example? What are the indicators associated with it? So I think if you think about it in those terms, I feel like that's been going well. I think there's some logistic things that we have to basically kind of figure out around them, particularly around, like when does an engineering allocation come to an end, so to speak. So I think that's kind of where we have next steps to work on from that perspective. I'll turn it around to you, Greg. Do you have any early impressions?
I'm kind of biased on this one because I proposed it a couple times earlier, so I think it's great that we have engineering allocation. So I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. I'll also note that I'm going to send out a survey here, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to basically ask team members to think about other long range things that we just haven't had time to spend on. So that's an example of we're trying to build up that backlog of, okay, what are the things that we really think are important to address as from a product perspective that historically we haven't necessarily had product investment in or product investment buy-in in. So like that's the other thing to kind of consider here.
All right, there's nothing else.
Jason.
P.
Yep. So with NFS out of the way, what do you see as the next major engineering effort in regards to data at GitLab's SaaS scale?
Are we just focused on SaaS, or are we talking about GitLab scale for the company itself?
Specifically looking at SaaS.
Okay.
What
Yeah.
what do we need to do engineering wise to better enable SaaS to handle the scale that we are?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that I would kind of focus on. Actually, probably three vectors I'd probably focus on. So the first one, and I feel like we've got initiatives on the first two. So, and the third one, I think we effectively have initiatives on. So the first one that I would call out is we are working on, we got our DB performance under control by basically optimizing queries and fixing a number of issues associated with that. And we have an effort around basically sharding out or decomposition of the DB information into multiple sets associated with that, right? So I think that's probably one of the first ones that I would say is like we have an initiative around that to basically decompose the work so that we can basically partition it. And by the way, I'm being a little bit loose with my terms here when I shouldn't be. So Craig will correct me as soon as I falter here. But the basic idea here is that, you know, by distributing the load, we'll see greater scale and be able to handle it potentially for the next several years, rather than saying that, you know, hey, 6 to 12 months from now we'll be in a problematic situation. So that's the first vector. The second vector that I see is you know, we want to get to 20 million builds a day. And when you talk about that scale, there's lots of interesting problems there associated with it for the CI system. So like that's probably the next one that's top of mind. We have an engineering allocation associated with that, and we're starting to see some early fruits on that, particularly around the pending queue and being able to process it. So I'm pretty encouraged by that. And then the third vector is kind of one which I'll call, I'm not even sure what the best call it, but like, if you look at our solution, what we're basically doing is a lot of our work is either on the front end management of code software development, or it's around adding capabilities that basically leverage CI capabilities. So like if you look at the sec section, they're basically largely leveraging the CI system to basically do that validation. I expect more of that with machine learning and other capabilities associated with that. And because of that, I could see very interesting cases of, okay, as we develop out that CI, not necessarily the CI system itself from a perspective of actually the processing and queuing associated with it and getting jobs launched, but the actual job launching and the user experience associated with that. How do we focus on that? So, you know, oftentimes you'll hear Sid talk about how do we find the test that's going to break first so we can have that failure as quickly as possible. That's kind of from a testing methodology perspective, but, you know, I could see other as we add other capabilities to the system, that's potentially what we want to see is how do we get that information as quickly to the customer as possible to basically give them some kind of indicator about what's been changed in the software development or those capabilities. And I'll turn that really quickly around to you, Jason. Which one did I miss?
So we talked a little bit about handling the database load, and that is the central point in a lot of how the site actually operates. But the more we do to the API, even if we make sure that the database is performant, the more the backing storage gets loaded down, the more requests it has to serve in parallel and in flight under extreme load. So Giddily and Prefect, Giddily HA, and how we figure out the method to do this at our scale will eventually filter it down to our customers, of course. But that's really going to be the challenge, is we can have a target of 20 million builds per day, but 20 million builds per day also means probably 20 million clones per day, and handling that.
That's a good call out that I completely missed on API and front end experience. So I think that's the other area that we kind of got to focus on, and I should definitely add that to my answer. So thanks for holding me accountable there. Appreciate it. Cool. Let's move on to Danielle, or back to Danielle.
Yeah, so this is an apology and an ask, which is I think we might have made some communication errors around how we communicated unfiltered blog going away. And there's some people in this room who I'm really hoping we can engage around the blog. So I wanted to just mention that we are absolutely still looking to feature engineering posts on the blog. We just need a little more process as we get bigger. We've had some unintended consequences for some of the things we maybe reposted. So we're trying to sort that out and kind of thread the needle between kind of freedom and transparency, but also protecting the company. But there's a lot of topics that you're interested in that we would love to be talking to our community about, where frankly, on the content team, we're probably not technical enough to write about them ourselves. So we really need to leverage other smart people, but sometimes it's really time consuming to imagine writing your own blog post. So we want to provide more ghostwriting support and just other things. So basically just asking, hey, if you are curious about the blog, if you wanted to do a company post, can you just throw your name into this agenda item? And if you have any specific topics, and I'll follow up with you and maybe let other people know who aren't in this call that you're all really welcome on the blog.
Cool, and I went first, which is I love to hear. I love whenever Stan and I have a one-on-one weekly, and one of the things he talks about is when he does a blog post, which are usually pretty awesome insights into the product or other experiences. So I'd love to hear that folks are still getting involved in doing that, and I've got one as well, Danielle. So I added to the list there.
Amazing. Thank you. These are the top traffic driving posts we do. Are the ones that come from really credible technical people on the team. So we really want to have more of them. Cool, thank you. Sam, you're next.
Yeah, I was just, I saw the Unreview acquisition that was announced, I think last week or earlier this week, and excited to see that. I was curious if you or anyone had any thoughts about the relationship between that new applied ML group and auto DevOps. Both seem kind of targeted at, making it easier, more automatic to do various DevOps things. So yeah, curious if there's thoughts there.
Yeah, good question. In fact, it came up earlier today, so it sounds like we've got some things that we got to figure out how to better communicate as an organization. So just calling that out for transparency. So in talking with David on this topic, one of the things that kind of came up is like, where do we fit like an acquisition like this into the organization, given that's kind of a new area? I don't know if folks know, but there's actually an ML Ops seg, and then there's applied machine learning. And the reason why we did that is because ML Ops is supposed to be about how do we enable customers to do machine learning with GitLab better, as opposed to applied machine learning, which is how do we take applied machine learning and basically apply it to our product. It's conceivable that, given the fact that the name of the company is Unreview, that this could have actually sat in code review as an example. That's one of the things that we did debate a little bit in the topic of this. But really, what we're intending to do with this group is kind of think of it in terms of different places we can apply this. So when you say relationship between applied ML and auto DevOps, I think the answer is yes. The intent of this group is actually to figure out how best to work to integrate machine learning across the product, not just in this particular area. We felt like by starting out as an independent group that we had a better opportunity to potentially do that, but it's going to require that group to basically have a heavy interaction with the teams that it's working with. So it's a little bit more cross dependency than we typically like in this situation. But we felt like, given the expertise that's required, as well as which areas to basically engage in, we felt it was better to start this way and try it this way than seed it in a group and potentially only have that technology exist within that part of the product set from that perspective. And talking to David about it probably is the best person at this point. If you have further questions, though, I think I've captured kind of the vision there.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Mech, I guess, on to you.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out in public to the three teams that helped us push the key initiative from the prospect across the finish line. Multiple iterations on code review, Geo, and also Giddily. There's a Slack message there. I'll give a link to, and I want to use some airtime to also showcase. We did record a Giddily failover video on YouTube Unfiltered, and that's really cool to see. When Giddily fails over and things come up. Huge thanks to everyone in development for your support, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And just to make sure folks don't feel left out, like in general, we've got a lot of great activities going on in various parts of the organization. A lot of great work going on in fulfillment with cloud licensing and the previous EOA, though that's been a few months behind us. You know, and a lot of great work in scalability in the ops teams associated with that. SEC continues to be one of our big revenue winners, which is a great sign of just how well we can engage customers associated with that. And, you know, we wouldn't be able to pull that all together and without enablement, basically providing to our customers an enabling capability to basically do that. You know, and of course, like our core product of dev, you know, let's not forget dev from that perspective in regards to the fact of all the functionality that gives. I know I personally couldn't do my job without all the functionality that's dev is doing related to issue management, epics, roadmaps, and all the other features and functionality. So general, I know I missed somebody, so I apologize about that, but just want to say it feels like we've got a great team working together and doing a lot of great work. Really appreciate everybody's hard efforts. Cool. Any last minute questions? All right, everybody, thanks for a great development group conversation.